right now, and welcome to everyone who's on. Everybody might have just seen a little flash come up that we are recording these sessions, so you might, if you need to listen back, or if we have a special presentation, you might be able to go back and listen to those. We had a fairly good response for this time slot, I guess, on Tuesday mornings, but of course after that I got some feedback that several people were in class, so I'm not sure what to do about that. But we'll just push on with the group that we have. We did have a pretty good response for attending today, so hopefully a few more people will be joining us soon. So I guess we'll just welcome everyone to the beginning of the semester. And first off, we'd like to go around and have everybody introduce themselves and tell us about their program. I think we have at least one new person, I think, on our call so far right now, that we can so we can share who's here and what we're doing in the schools. And if you have a project, you could tell us a little bit about that as well. So let's see, I'm going to start at with Gary, since he was just chatting a moment ago. You want to introduce yourself, Gary, and your team and your work, what you guys are doing?
Hello, I'm Gary Morgan, and I'm from the College of Lake County, which is about 40 miles north of Chicago. And we just started into our third year of an NSF ATE grant, in which we're developing some low-cost trainers. By low cost, we define that as under $1,000 per trainer. We have developed 2 to date, and this third year we will be finalizing our third trainer. We've also put in an associate degree at the College of Lake County. We're doing a lot of work on dual credit pathways with high schools, both in the CTE curriculum as well as Project Lead the Way. We run a professional development workshop in July in Jacksonville for high school faculty that are looking to teach in a dual credit pathway. And that has been very well received, and I think probably one of our best practices for the grant. I'm retired from the College of Lake County, so I'm just back working part-time managing. I'm not the PI on this grant. I'm just managing the grant. But that's what we've been up to for a couple of years now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gary. And the program that Gary's working with is an output of their Department of Labor grant that they were involved in around mechatronics back in the TAP 1 round, I think. And so they're continuing this effort. I think that's a great path for you guys in the College of Lake County and the partners that were involved in that particular project. Okay, I see that Dan Horine has joined us, so I'm going to let him introduce himself and let him kind of take over the meeting as our host. Dan, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry I was a little late. We had some difficulty this morning getting logged in.
Yeah, that's okay. We all get that once in a while. I think we just take turns.
We do. So my name is Dan Horine. I'm the program head of Mechatronics here at Virginia Western. The program is 11 years old, and we currently have 171 students in the Mechatronics program. I've been the PI of a $200,000 grant getting the high school teachers to work with us to feed our programs, and then recently an $800,000 project called Pace Me, where we developed a fab lab. And that's kind of how the Mechatronics Community Exchange started. I was in need of building a fab lab, and somebody wanted to build a mechatronics program. So we started communicating on sharing ideas, and that's really the whole purpose of this event, is just to share curriculum, share resources, and make life easier for all of us. And I'm gonna, is there anyone else that needs to do introductions, Marilyn?
Yes, Dan, this is Gary. I introduced myself and then you, so
Okay.
the rest of them we haven't been introduced.
So Dan LaRoche, LaRochelle?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. My name is Dan LaRochelle. I work for Manchester Community College, which I'm the Department for Advanced Manufacturing. We've been doing a mechatronics pathway in our advanced manufacturing program for a couple of years now, about 5 years. It started with a TAC grant, and we are looking into our first new to ATE grant being submitted in 2 weeks. So we are looking at developing mechatronics 2-year associate's degree, working with Siemens. I met a bunch of you at the conference this summer, the ATE conference, and I look forward to learning more about this whole community. There's a lot to share there. I've been doing mechatronics and robotics for 20 years, so I think I can be a good asset to the team.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we have Mr. and Mrs. Dagan at Stevens College.
It's Don Dagan.
Thank you, Don.
I'm a fifth-year instructor in a new program we call electromechanical technology here. So it's a 2-year associates, not really a design engineering focus, more of a technician, hands-on, on-the-floor focus. I think this is the second conference call I've made. I've been aware of this exchange since Pittsburgh High Tech, I forget how many years ago. It's just hard to break away, and I always find it useful, so I'm looking forward to hear what we have to talk about today.
Great. Well, welcome. And so I guess at this point, what I'd like to do is open it up to the floor. Are there any pressing issues? And so I can ask some probing questions like, are you struggling to find labs for pneumatics or electro-pneumatics? Or what? Another probing question I have is, what textbook are you using for industrial electronics? We seem to really struggle with that content. So with those two questions out there, is there anybody that has some possible answers or that is struggling with pneumatics or hydraulics?
I think up here at the College of Lake County, Dan, we're doing all right in hydraulics and pneumatics. In the advanced motor control, we had the same challenge with trying to find a textbook. So we have a couple of references, but no required text. And the curriculum is all that has been developed is open source, available, to the students at no cost. But it was kind of a, one of these deals where we might have ended up having to have 3 or 4 textbooks, and it just wasn't cost effective for students. You get a little bit out of one and a little bit out of another. So we kind of made a conscious decision that any materials we give out to the students will be open source materials. And we haven't taught that course yet. It was just developed as part of our associate degree. But I'm kind of with you on that we didn't find any one thing that would work across what we were doing.
So Don or Dan, do you guys have any feedback or input onto motor controls and specifically the electronics behind the motor controls?
This is Dan. We're experimenting with a couple things. We have used Tooling U in the past. If you're not familiar with that, that's by the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. It's a good jump-off space because they have like 1,000 different 1-hour little modules that you can kind of string together to kind of make your own textbook. So I've been using some of those as a basis, almost like a PowerPoint, and then diving deeper, a little bit deeper in with the lab work.
Okay, so Dan, this is Dan Horine at Virginia Western. We use Tooling U quite extensively. The students buy it every semester for 2 years, and they can buy it as one lump sum for 2 years and get a pretty substantial discount, or they can buy it by semester. We also supplied Tooling U for all of our high schools. We got a pretty good discount to buy a site license for 8 different high schools through the project. And that's also helped students as they come to me. I kind of know their background, and it helps. But as far as motor controls go, Tooling U is good, and it's a good reference, but I have found that it's not quite the depth that I need for the Siemens Level 2 certification.
We're seeing the same thing.
Okay.
At Thaddeus Stevens, in this program, I don't teach the electrical stuff. We have a different instructor for all that. I do know that he's gone through in the 5 years we've existed a lot of different textbooks. So everything you guys are seeing, I experienced in the hydraulic and pneumatic, but I pretty much stabilized that. I'm using a lot of ATP publisher. Their fluid power I like a lot. I still augment it with some PTDA. We use the material from LabBulk because that's the trainers we have. But as far as industrial motor controls, I'm not sure specifically what the other instructor's using, but I can tell you our experiences are very much reflected in what you guys have said. I'm curious, Tooling U is always pinging on me, and I've not tried any of their curriculum. So they have complete like AC, DC circuit fundamentals and all the different blocks building up to motor control?
They do. The best way I know to describe Tooling University is, you remember encyclopedias, right? We all had them growing up. It's basically an encyclopedia for manufacturing, and there are multiple books inside of Tooling U, like PLCs or pneumatics and hydraulics. There's even a shop fundamentals that has math from counting to calculus.
Wow.
And
so what's the per student cost of, and I guess you buy everything, you don't a la carte it, you either have access or you don't.
Correct. They can a la carte it for industry, and we do that for some customized training through workforce development. But for education, there's kind of 2 pricing structures. High school, they can get it for $99 for a year.
Okay. Per student.
Per student, unless you try to negotiate a discount.
Right.
So what I negotiated with 8 high schools was $1,500 a site license. So if they had more than 15 students, it paid for itself.
Okay. Is your connection there, are you giving them credit towards your program via that?
The way that I do the credit is if they pass the Siemens certification level 1, I'll offer them 4 college classes: pneumatics and hydraulics, AC and DC circuits, introduction to mechatronics and mechatronic systems.
Okay.
And then that's all that they're doing in the high school. But I'm trying to align level 2 to the next 6 classes. But Tooling U helps me get a reference when they come into the classroom. The other thing is we use Tooling U here, and so some of the students are like, well, I've already done this. Well, repetition is super helpful, 1, and 2, now you can help me with other students.
Yep.
If you know it that well, come on, step up and let's work together and get everybody on the same page.
So what's the per student college structure?
So they sell it at the bookstore, they mark it up 30%. So what I do is I get a code from Tooling U directly, and I put that code in my Blackboard or whatever LMS I'm using at the time, and they can buy it direct. But if they have financial aid, they need to have access to the content through the bookstore.
Right. Understand.
So the cost is, I think it's $150 roughly a person for post-secondary.
And that's 2 years or 1?
1 semester.
Oh, that's per semester.
There's a discount. They don't have to pay 4 times $150 for 2 years.
Okay.
I can send you that pricing structure, or Tooling U, just reach out to them. They're owned by the Society of Manufacturing Engineers.
Yeah, I'm an SME member. They ping on me all the time, and because of the name of it, I always just thought of it as for machinists, and I wasn't aware till you guys brought it up how broad it was. So I'm intrigued.
So I'll give you another outcome, or kind of our students learn in multiple ways, right? We know we teach hands-on, we have lab activities. Some of them read better by learning, some of them read better by hearing. So Tooling U will read it to you. It has images in there. So I've got single dads cooking dinner for kids, playing Tooling U in the background. I had this one student taking the PLC class, and he didn't understand sequencing. So I happened to be at the bank. I logged into Tooling U. looked under PLCs and sequencing, and they had this big rotor drum, like with little ears sticking up. And I said, Isaac, look at this picture. Think about this drum rotating, and every time that ear came around and hit it, that operation would happen. That's kind of this concept of sequencing that we're talking about. And then he understood it. So it is online content, but they can download the PDF file outside of class. So those of us like me that live in the country, we don't have good high-speed internet, they can still download the PDFs and look at the content on their computer, even while not being online. And
would you say the graphics are real, like, cutting edge?
No, it's
like
not.
Movies from today, or are they kind of?
No, they're not super duper. They're interactive to make sure they're not brain dead doing it.
Right.
So, every now and then there's a lesson, but the truth is our students aren't reading the textbooks like they should, and this is just another way to kind of snooker them into looking at the content. The other advantage that you can see is from the administrative side, you can tell how many minutes the person looked at the content and how many minutes the person took taking the test. So and I can use it as leverage. We know we all kind of have to motivate our students, and FERPA requires that we can't share their grades, right? So none of us can show grades to motivate students, but I can show, hey, in pneumatics and hydraulics, I've assigned 15 Tooling U lessons, and I can show completed lessons as a bar graph on the board. And most students have done 15, and then you got Joe, who's only done 3, and Mary's only done 7. And it adds a little peer pressure to the group of, hey, why don't you guys catch up and do your work? That's another advantage. Dan, I don't know if you use it that way as well.
Yeah, it's the whole concept of it reading to them and just different learning styles is real critical to us, especially in the clientele that we serve. So we found the same thing with books. We couldn't get them to read the book. But with the Tooling U, because it has a little online test that goes with it, I think that kind of reinforces it, But overall, it's been a good resource. But we definitely found where we have to enrich our lessons in addition to. But it hits a lot of the talking points, which are good jump-off spots to play a video, do a very directed lab, and things of that nature.
So in pneumatics and hydraulics, that's the textbook. It's Tooling U. I don't lecture with Tooling U. I lecture with the Festo online content, and I let them go through Tooling U on their own, because I found that if students are doing Tooling U at home and then I go covering it in class, they get a little irritated. They're like, buddy, I already did this last night. But it's a good tool. You definitely lecture from it.
Can you explain that? Festo, do you mean LabVolt or Festo didactic stuff and online, but you're using as lecture? Can you give me details?
Yes. So before LabVolt Festo bought LabVolt, Festo had some online content that was related to Mechatronics specifically. And you can contact your local educational representative and probably get a trial account for it. But that's really high-end video, and it's got a good voices kind of read over for the content. And I find that does more to spark conversation. And then the Tooling U is where they dig down in and learn the content.
Related to the Mech Lab trainers, are you familiar with those?
I am familiar with those. We bought, probably a dozen of those Mech Lab trainers for our high school programs. They have different content through LabVolt for those that are more kind of like amateur, more kind of step-by-step, go through this lab and this exercise.
Right.
But the Festo content is more industrial. It's more online learning. Now, I don't offer that to my students because I think I had it priced once and it was just way too exorbitant per student. So I lecture with it, and then I let the students use Tooling U. Sometimes they'll feel like there's, hey, why are you using this? And then we're doing something else. The reality is the content is exactly the same. It's just presented in a different way. And since our learners learn different, why not try more than one way to deliver the stuff, right? I mean, and that's kind of my thought process. Dan, I don't do a lot with read over. That actually annoys me when it reads. But like you said, we may have some ESL students. We may have some students that are auditory as opposed to visual learners. And so that really helps them.
So we have Dan, a couple more folks on the line. Doug Pauly's on the line from Central, and Juan. I don't know where Juan's from. Do you want to break in here and introduce yourselves?
Dan, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm Doug Pauly. I'm the PI for Mechatronics with Instrumentation in Columbus, Nebraska. And this is our second ATE grant. We have a pretty established mechatronics program, but we wanted to add instrumentation to it. And so for the last 2 years, we've been adding instrumentation to the program. We've gotten industry really involved. We've used the build model, and it was excellent. It really got industry involved in helping us design trainers, building trainers, that type of thing. I will make one comment on the Festo software. We use Fluid Sim P and H for our pneumatics, and the students all have to use that before they can get on the trainers. It's a simulation software where they build the systems, and it really works great. We use that for both our traditional students and our short-term training programs.
Wonderful, Doug. Thank you. I'll echo that, and then we need to go to Juan and let him introduce himself. But we use the LabVolt trainers for motors, and they have the full simulation software for that. And I'll just echo what Doug said. We all know students come into the laboratory environment. They haven't read the labs. They aren't prepared. They come in, they make measurements, they write down numbers. They don't have a clue even sometimes what the units of the numbers are. Then we ask them to go home and do a lab write-up. And that's when the learning takes place, or some of it. So, and I kind of stole this from Doug, is have them go through the lab virtually first. Then they know what type of data they should be expecting. And they come to me and go, well, what if we do this now? And after they complete the lab, of course, I let them do that. Now they're thinking on their own, and I know they're learning because they ask those questions of what if we change this and change the lab a little bit like that? Hey, that's a great hypothesis. Let's see what happens. So I just wanted to add that to Doug. Juan, we always see is Juan as a guest. Juan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I am she, not he, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I am from San Antonio, Texas, from Alamo Community Colleges. And I think this is my first time to join this meeting. I'm so happy I think I will continue to do this also, but I am from workforce training side. I'm not academic. So, but we have a mechatronics program here in academic, but also I use the same equipment to do the workforce training with the companies. We set up Alamo College Technical Institute. We have a program focused on mechatronics from the fundamentals, technical math, like hydraulics, pneumatics, electrical, until the troubleshooting class, robotics, etc. So, yeah, but we also we have a lot of, I'm kind of heard somebody talking about the tooling you, Festo, LabVolt. We have we work with them. We have been using all these tools on our trainings.
Wonderful. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Any other kind of pressing issues from the group? I think tooling you kind of came up accidentally, but we were talking about pneumatics and hydraulics or industrial electronics. And those were my questions, but let's open it up to the floor. Are there any things, labs or exercises that you need to get your program to the next level, or what industry is asking you for out of your program?
So, sorry. No, you go ahead.
This is Gary, and the last couple of 2 or 3 weeks, I've been hearing a lot of buzz up in northern Illinois, most of it coming out of Wisconsin, on Industry 4.0 standards. And I'm just curious with the group if you're hearing any buzz with that standard in your demographic.
So Marilyn Barger did a great job of having a presentation at High Tech this year addressing Industry 4.0. So we had SMC, Amatrol, and Festo, or Siemens presenting Industry 4.0. And what I gathered from that workshop, Gary, is that Mechatronics, what Siemens is doing is Mechatronics is Industry 4.0 with adding some modules. And the modules would be like PLC networking, human machine interface, and probably GUI design of the the interface, probably a little bit more in process control, closed loop control, getting feedback, but basically I don't think there's a vast difference, and I'd say less than maybe 10 or 15% between what Mechatronics skill set is and what Industry 4.0 demands. Anyone else have feedback?
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for that nice, very concise summary. I think I came back from that session and a subsequent one that I attended later in the summer with kind of the same feeling, like we were 80, 85, 90% there in many of the Mechatronics programs. So there's always differences between the offerings at different colleges, but that we were pretty much there, and that the communication piece was being integrated even more than it has been in the past, and that may actually change some processing cycles a little bit. But for the most part, we were in good shape for being able to squeeze in a little bit more of what they're calling Industry 4.0. My question to Gary is the standard. What if he meant something specific about the standard? Industry 4.0 standards. Not sure what you're referring to there. Does anybody, or do you know, Gary?
Well, no, I just wondered, how recognizable it actually is with industry. We had a webinar with Festo, our grant team did, to learn more about it. And I agree. It sounds like if you're already aligned with Siemens, you're very closely aligned with Industry 4.0, but there are some differences. But I'm just trying to get a sense of, is this a new flavor of the month, or is this thing really have some wheels underneath it, and is it something that industry is talking about? So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I think when you classify it, you start with the Industrial Revolution and you go through that process. Mechatronics is Industry 4.0. I mean, right? We're integrating IP addresses everywhere. It's highly IT focused, and I would just say to Don, the difference between Mechatronics and an electromechanical program is the IT integration. When you incorporate computers and microcontrollers and CAD, CAM, and CNC machining, I think that's what kind of rounds out Mechatronics.
I think this is Doug Pauly in Columbus, Nebraska, but I'm hearing quite a bit about the 4.0, but I think Dan and Marilyn are right on. It's a lot of what we've been doing with Mechatronics. I think it's a little bit more of an emphasis on the communication side of it and talking back and forth between the instruments, but I think it's definitely here to stay. We went to the Plastics Conference in Florida in May, and that was talk all over there on how all these plastic protection machines were going to be talking to every device within the plant.
Yeah, that's Industry 4.0. It's just that everything is connected, and that provides, we now need to teach security, right? As we teach networking of all these PLCs, somebody's got to consider how do we create a firewall and prevent others from hacking into our network and making changes. And Juan, you had a question, I think, also earlier, and we started with another statement first.
Don't forget to unmute.
We may have lost her for a moment.
Not there, not responding. But Doug Lavin actually joined us, so we could ask him. He's been on for a few minutes, so you might want to chime in on your point of view from Minnesota about Industry 4.0.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was to answer your question about my classes. I have two cohorts of freshmen that are back to back. That's why I let them go an hour early, so they were happy with that. But I do have another group coming up here in a half hour. But yeah, as long as our industry partners are getting what they need, they very seldom ask us about. And I was just looking at, I Googled Industry 4.0. And it says the current trend of automation and data exchange in manufacturing technologies, and kind of to Dan's point, this is mechatronics, and we kind of change with our advisory board's input, but we kind of change with things to come, and we're hopefully on the crest of that wave. So I heard like cybersecurity and those kinds of things, and Internet of Things. We are now talking to our computer careers people to come down and talk and maybe offer a 3-credit class in just that and add it to our pool of mechatronics courses to keep us in that, I guess, in the know of what's happening out in the real world. And so I think we kind of change with it. And just the fact that, mechatronics kind of evolved out of the electromechanical, and we added control systems to kind of monitor, things that are happening out there, nodes and data points and temperatures and whatever it might be, and do SCADA systems. I think we're kind of there. And I'm not trying to put it down by saying, well, it's just another name for something. But I think we are, just by default, most of our mechatronic programs are following the scheme of the Industry 4.0. So there's a nice little chart on Wikipedia, and I know you can only trust Wikipedia so far, but I think it was put out by probably the people where you went to the conference, Marilyn, and it kind of shows a real nice graphic of mechatronics working in the cyber world and with production floors, and a little bit even with logistics. So I really think it's in our base core content that we teach. So and I know we're kind of in a different region than the East Coast, but I think our industry partners would tell us if they wanted us to make changes.
That's a great way to validate what you're doing, is just say, look, we're delivering what industry wants. Yep. And they're in Industry 4.0. So mechatronics is it's the skill set that defines what Industry 4.0 demands.
Right.
When we talk about these industrial revolutions, you can classify them that way, but now we need to give a name to the skill set that the technicians need.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what we're doing. You're right. The industry partners are living in Industry 4.0. Yep. And they advise us.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful.
The lady from San Antonio, did you happen to come back to us and have that question?
Oh, yeah, I'm back. I know, I'm here, yeah.
Good.
The question, I forgot. I think it passed.
It's okay. It happens.
Yeah. So
I just have a quick question for the group. I am looking at adding collaborative robots to the mechatronics program. Our industry Plastics One is now using some collaborative robots, and industry, we're going to do a collaborative robot workshop next week. Are there anybody in the group that currently uses collaborative robots? And if so, what kind do you use?
Hey, Dan, this is Doug. We don't, but we just had the people from a local distributor come in, and we're looking at Universal. So, yeah, we've had a number of people come in, and matter of fact, they're coming in next week to do another demo. So we're looking and kind of poised to buy and get into more collaborative as well.
So we got $220,000 from a budget amendment that got refunded, and I'm going to do collaborative robots. From my research, it looks like Universal was the first to market and is about 80% of the market share. There's another collaborative robot, Rethink Robotics. They had a Baxter, but I learned they're discontinuing the Baxter, and so now there's a Sawyer robot. And now ABB has a collaborative. I believe Puka has a collaborative. So just trying to, we're leaning towards Universal also, Doug, but I didn't know if anybody else had some experience.
So Dan, this is Dan LaRochelle. We're doing some stuff in collaboratives right now. We just had Perkins money get approved, and we'll have one by the end of the month. I've done a lot of research into this area, and UR is definitely by far the leader. What's happening in industry right now is the Fanucs, the ABBs, and a lot of those guys are all coming out with Me Too robots.
Yep.
And they're saying their robots are collaborative, but they haven't really changed anything.
Okay.
So the trick to it, so for example, like Fanuc, they put like green foam on their robot, and and they can put like a LiDAR, so when you get close to the robot, it will go slow. And if you get real close, it'll stop. But that's not collaborative. Collaborative is the robot's actually moving around at the same time. So right now they're classifying collaborative robots in 4 different categories. And that's how people are saying, oh, I'm collaborative and I'm collaborative. So this is a booming industry, and UR really has, they just came out with their new E-Series, and they're really, really easy to program. They have some Robotique grippers that go with them that you can mount, that camera's mounted in it, and you can do vision programming on the spot within 10 minutes.
Wow.
So it's like unheard of what they're doing, but they're really, they thought about how can we integrate robotics with humans and be in the same exact space and be safe. So they definitely are cornering the market. I would stay away from Rethink for right now because they're not as accurate. But that's my feedback.
Wonderful. Thank you. That is so helpful.
Yeah, and we heard the same thing because obviously it was kind of a trade show in our area, and Kawasaki and Fanuc, they were talking that, they have collaborative robots too, and it's like, yeah, not really, but we kind of heard the same exact thing.
Well, that's wonderful, and I proposed mechatronics and automation. People get so scared of it, saying it's going to take my job. It's not going to take your job. Instead of doing the same monotonous task and developing carpal tunnel or hearing loss or being filthy or having the opportunity for your hands to be crushed, let the robot do that, and let's give you 50% more wages to control the machinery as opposed to be the machinery.
Yep,
that's what I'm trying to educate Southwest Virginia in that, and that's a little tough sometimes. They can be a little slow.
Dan, this is Marilyn. I just a month ago went to Wake Forest Technical College in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they have a small. I don't think it's a small new to ATE, but they took a smaller grant from NSF to develop some curriculum. They have a Universal and I think ABB right now, and they're shopping for their third variety. I'm not sure where they are with that, but they've set up a lab with these two, and they're actually developing some curriculum. It looks like it's going into the workforce kind of training part of their college, which is different for NSF ATE, but nonetheless, they're developing some modules, and I attended their advisory board committee early in September, and they were getting a lot of good input from the industry, and it really sounded like there was some, more and more implementation of using of the collaboratives in the companies that they were working with there. So I think it's an important kind of next step probably for a lot of programs to get involved. It's good to hear that all of you were thinking about it as well.
Yes, it is. So we should probably discuss collaborative robots next time.
I should try to, maybe I could get one of them to get on one time and talk about the curriculum that they're developing.
Yes. So it's
If
Go ahead.
if I could real quick,
Sure.
we had the Baxter Rethink. We've had that about 3 years now, and actually I developed some curriculum for that and then taught a course using it. And I would agree with all the comments. We're very happy with the Baxter, except they don't make it anymore. Like you said, Dan, they kind of replaced it with this Sawyer. But the only problem that I had with it really from the beginning was accuracy. It's not as accurate as it needs to be, but it gave us some good use for a beginning level robotics course, and it got students thinking, in this collaborative approach. But I would agree, from my experience in writing the curriculum for that and teaching it, that I'm sure there are better ones out there.
That's wonderful. This one meeting alone has helped me tremendously. And I have one final kind of probing thought for everyone. I'm going to send a link to a TED Talk about athleticism in machines, and it's a good discussion about drones. So a lot of the community colleges are often through workforce and maybe introduction to drone classes. And I am implementing drones in the Mechatronics program as part of feedback, closed loop control, looking at the gyroscope and making changes to the outputs of the motors to keep this drone level, and making a connection of heating. We have a company called Novozymes that grows bugs at certain temperatures and humidity levels. And we can make the connection of, hey, if we're keeping this drone level, it could be synonymous with keeping this temperature and pressure and humidity the same in an environment to grow these bugs, to kind of hook the students. Has anybody else gotten into the drone market? And I've built my 4th drone now, and I'm flying FPV and having a lot of fun, but I now need to connect it to the classroom, and I didn't know if anybody else is doing that.
Dan, this is Doug. We don't. Our civil engineering group, they use drones for obvious reasons, surveying and kind of stuff like that. But that's a good point, because that's going to be a market that's coming up real quickly. I think just maybe serviceability or adaptability. So I haven't thought of that, about putting that into our program.
It could hook students. I'm really concerned about the liability. I was in the classroom. We built our own drones. We were trying to synchronize the controller, right, transmitter with the receiver. And next thing you know, I got 12 students, and the person in the front of the room is connected to the person in the back of the room, and they have their throttle wide open, right? So you can imagine how dangerous that was. Luckily, I made everyone take their propellers off before we started. But if someone hadn't done that, somebody could have gotten cut. So the other thing is, the FAA requirements. So and insurance.
Yeah.
Get a little pushback from the college.
Have you got your pilot license yet?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, mine's registered and I'm good. I'm just not allowed to use it commercially. As soon as I posted a video online, the pilot at my church proceeded to let me know that he knew I was over 400 feet and that I better have a registration. So I got it immediately.
Yeah, there was a group up here that was trying to develop some curriculum, and they got about halfway through, and I don't know if they finished or not. It was more geared towards high schools. But the problem that they got into was, it was really cool, but they had to get licenses, and we're really close to an airport, so it's really critical. Yep. So we got to be careful with that. And then the safety in the classroom was another thing that they had issues with. And then the last thing that really that slowed them down is the technology inside of the drones is moving so fast right now. As soon as they wrote curriculum around a kit, the kit changed.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking. Is I just built a drone that'll do 90 miles an hour for under $100, and I don't know of any curriculum. I did use the co-drone. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with the co-drone. It's kind of like an Arduino drone, and we offered a high school camp. But again, I go back to industry. We need to teach industry concentrated proficiencies, not just because it's cool or fun. So I'm trying to connect it back to process control every time, and that we're really doing closed loop. And this TED Talk I send this to you all is really interesting to talk about the algorithms that are used. And that's something that we struggle with teaching programming here in our mechatronics program, is getting the students to wrap their arms around the concept of an algorithm and how it's not the perfect answer to a question every time, but it gets us closer and closer and closer to the finite result.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking into. I mean, we're in a heavy ag triangle area here, so they're used a lot, but mainly just the user portion. I don't hear anything about serviceability and those kinds of things.
So I've got 5 drones. 2 have been in trees thanks to Florence. 1 is now out of a tree. But I've done a lot of repair, Doug. I have crashed them and had motors will get bent, right? So I've got to cut the wires and resolder new motors. And I've even done some vibration analysis, right, to figure out which motor was bad. I'm just curious.
Sure. Yep.
I don't think we should put a tons focus on it. It is something that we'll probably integrate into the mechatronics program. And I am interested in curriculum and resources, but like you said, it's changing so quickly, almost like CAD, where you have to use some type of online learning to stay current.
Right.
And so for the last 10 minutes or so, I just want to open it up to the floor. I never want to be dominant, just trying to be probing, asking questions. Are there any other statements or questions or burning desires that people need answers to? How I'm going to just throw it out there. How are y'all handling retention? And specifically, I added physics to our program about 7 years ago, and we've got some physics professors that are a little arrogant. So I didn't know how anybody else is handling retention in their mechatronics program.
I guess I'll start off here because then I got to get to class, but this is Doug. And I guess for those of you who don't know me, I'm from Minnesota, Mankato. We have physics and we dealt with that with a math instructor some years ago, and we've got a really good rapport now with our math faculty. But yeah, we have the AAS, so we have physics, we have technical writing, we have the college algebra, and that's just hopefully someday that the students can do a 2+2 with our neighboring university. But our retention's been pretty well. In orientation, we tell them right up front, our industry partners are interested in an AAS degree, and that's not us telling them so we can get more money out of the student. That's really what these people want. So the rigor is up there, but the retention seems to be really well. We have a little bit of dropout in the first week, but that's, most people, some people don't know what they're getting into when they sign up for a class. They hear robots or robotics and they think it's something else, and so we'll lose a couple, but for the most part, we retain our students pretty well throughout the 2 years.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but
yeah, it's great. Anybody else have some retention success or issues? Any specific courses?
Yeah, Dan, at the College of Lake County, we've been pretty proud of it in the past. We've run about 80%, maybe 85%. It's slightly dipped this year. The quality of student for some reason this year isn't what we've had in the past. But I think part of what our success has been, we have what we call a navigator that is involved with marketing and recruitment, and then is kind of the go-to person for that student throughout the program if issues arise. And they spend a fair amount of time up front trying to describe the best they can about the commitment the student is making when they register for the program. And I really think that has helped us quite a bit. And, in terms of how much time commitment, And, you know, if you're going to be working, what's a reasonable work schedule, if you're going to get yourself a part-time job. And like I said, also, if they have a single go-to person other than the instructor, if they want to raise other issues, you know, outside of the classroom that might be interfering with them succeeding. So I really think if there was a place we could point to for that success, you know, other than the instructors following up with students that may not show up for class or that fail an exam, I'd have to say that Navigator has been a real success point for us.
Wow, that's great. We used mentors and had a mentorship program, and that really helped. But it's, you know, it's not sustainable unless you have somebody run a mentorship program. These career navigators, I assume they're counselors at your school?
Well, actually, they're not in our case. They're hired specifically through the division, and we couldn't have a navigator for each program, so we have a navigator in advanced manufacturing course programs. It actually came out of a TAC grant that we had initially for a navigator for mechatronics, and we were able to sustain it, but we had to expand it beyond just mechatronics and have one in advanced manufacturing. So they're not counselors. They do work with the general recruiters at the college, but we found that it's so difficult to, you know, when you talk about mechatronics, it's not a common field that people know about. So we needed someone that could pay more attention to those that they're recruiting and give them more specifics.
Yeah, Gary, this is Doug. We have the same thing. We had a TAC grant, and we do Navigator, and we have matter of fact, we have kids coming into a manufacturing expo Thursday. Number of 10th graders coming through. So and it's run through our student services. So kind of the same thing, advanced manufacturing, and we have that Navigator program here as well.
That's great. We have a career counselor, or not counselor, but advisor for the School of STEM, but it's not specific, right? So they have to handle biology, mathematics, science, and it would be wonderful. We do have an industry liaison that NSF funded that really helps me placing students in internships, but he doesn't have the time to help with, you know, I can't get transportation, or having a hard time buying my books, or my stepdad, you know, hurting me, or, you know, things like that.
And, you know, if you do go after one, Dan, I wrote the original business plan and the return on investment for that position. Somehow, if you can present that to administration and they can see that if you can improve your retention from 60 to 80, and you take a look at the cost recovery aspect of the position in terms of revenue from tuition, it really piqued their attention, and I think that's what got them to fund it.
Wonderful.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Is there any way you can share that? Because I'm fighting that same thing. We had a TAC grant. I had one of these navigators, and a couple of years ago when the TAC grant went away, so did that position. And
yeah, I'll be happy to go back and dig out what we used for, you know, for the justification after the TAC grant. Was that Doug speaking?
That was
yes, it was, yeah. Oh, well, it was earlier, but.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to dig that out and send that out to the group.
Well, wonderful. I think Marilyn, we can wrap it up. I think that's a good hour.
Right. I guess that I want to say another word about the Navigator kind of program. I think the in the IT world, one of the big TAC grants also use that, and they developed the same kind of idea. I've not seen it, but the business plan that they presented after their TAC grant to their college to keep those navigators. I think they call them something different, but whatever. They have the same role. And, you know, the increase in retention was big enough that the school did buy into it, you know, and they continued those positions after the grant. And if you can find it, and if I get a chance, I'll ask this IT group if they have their business plan. But that's what it took to get the administrators to open their eyes.
Yeah. So to-dos, I will send the TED Talk link to Marilyn, and then maybe Daniele can send it out to everyone. If there are any other resources that you all think we brought up today that you'd like to share, please send those to Marilyn or myself, and we'll get them out to everyone. And if you have a request of something that isn't sent, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll send you what we have.
Sounds good.
Dan, could I ask one quick favor of you?
Certainly.
This is Gary, and there's no big rush, but in the next 2-3 weeks, could you send me your syllabus that you're using for process control?
Certainly.
We're going to be developing that course as the final leg for our Siemens Level 2, and I know you're aligned with them, and I'd really like to see what you're doing if I could.
Certainly. And we finally got the purchase order approved yesterday, so my learning credits are in. We'll become a Siemens partner school starting in the spring to start offering the Siemens Level 1 certification and hopefully Level 2 here in Virginia.
Very good.
Yep, I'll send that over to you, Gary.
Thanks.
Everyone have a great week.
You too. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Doug here. Do you want to have a conversation later on in the week, or